Hello and welcome to Daryo. My name is Tawney and we're here at the EBRD office in Tashkent. We're interviewing Mr. Andi Aranitasi, the new director for Uzbekistan. Mr. Aranitasi, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So this brings me into my first question. Uzbekistan has the 2030 strategy in place and has been working with the EBRD to implement it. And since 2018, we've seen that some changes are underway. Can you please elaborate a little bit on these changes that are in process?
So on this particular one, we really prefer to comment only on the approved document. At the moment, the strategy is still in the final stages of internal discussion, and we're discussing also certain items with the various stakeholders involved. So I will be able to comment in more detail at a later stage. But what I can say is that EBRD typically has three big strategic priorities. These are the green transition, digitalization, inclusion, and you would expect to find those aspects in the new country strategy. So that will be a focal point.
And that will bring us into our next question, which is about the green transition and the greenfield energy, solar power, renewable energies. How has the EBRD kind of worked within these projects in Uzbekistan?
Okay, that's a fair question. We have actually done quite a bit on the renewable energy space. We're present, I believe, in almost every single renewable project that Uzbekistan has tendered out or has awarded since we restarted operations 6 years ago. That's close to 3 gigawatt, which is very important. Also because the country has very ambitious targets. So they started with an initial target of 7 gigawatt for 2030. Last year it was revised to 12, and now very recently, about a month ago, by presidential decree, it was revised to 25. So the ambition is there. Now, in terms of working in the energy sector, I think for us as a multilateral financial institution, I think the financing or providing funding is the easier part. We are blessed, I think, with a very strong balance sheet, with a very conservative leverage model, and we also have very strong shareholders. We have more than 70 countries backing us. So I think what is important from the perspective of the sector for us has been the work that we have done overall together with our partner multilateral financial institutions, and also with the authorities to reform the sector and also to be able to design an electricity market which is sustainable in the long run. In that respect, for example, we have worked with the authorities on unbundling the electricity sector back in 2019. We have supported them in the preparation of a new electricity law, which we hope now to go through the parliament and be approved. We are supporting the tender process for 2 gigawatt of wind projects. We have supported some of the state-owned companies in the energy sector with their corporate governance. We're providing support in the clean energy transition in the country by having supported the Uzbek authorities prepare a low-carbon pathway for the electricity sector, which aims to get the sector to net zero emissions by 2050.
That's ambitious.
That's ambitious, but it's doable. It's doable, and it's good that the authorities, as I mentioned, they have lots of ambition when it comes to the rollout of renewable projects. And in the context of all this, we also have provided a lot of financing. Now, in respect of the projects themselves, this has been helped quite a bit by the fact that we have let's say, a robust structure which enables project finance. Most importantly, there is an offtake for the electricity production. There's an offtake which is of good quality and which seems to be appreciated even by some of the largest, let's say, international investors in the sector who are also present in the country. It is also helped by the fact that the authorities themselves, they are quite supportive of the structure, both with giving certain incentives for renewable projects, but also by providing backing of the offtake, which does enhance obviously the credit worthiness of the offtake agreement itself and makes the project more bankable. The projects then benefit also from specialized technical, environmental, and legal advice. So this also helps with making the design of these projects more sustainable. So this has enabled us to be able to do a lot. Having said that, the rule of thumb in the sector, and I'm a former energy banker myself and done quite a bit of renewables, is that given the intermittent nature of renewable energy, for every dollar that you invest in renewables, you have to invest $1 in the grid.
Yes, I was just about to ask you about that.
The Uzbek authorities understand this very well, and we have been working closely together in this respect. As EBRD, we have financed about 350 kilometers of new transmission lines, which are meant precisely to integrate some of the new renewable projects into the grid. And we have much more in the pipeline to work. And our partners from the Asian Development Bank and from IFC, they also have their own grid initiatives that they're working on with the authorities. So this is a very important part. One other which is also important is that you may have noticed the recent renewable projects in Uzbekistan are all being done with a battery storage element.
Yes.
So this is also something that we believe will help smooth out the integration of renewables, help also a little bit with the grid side. And as I mentioned, we have helped the authorities with the low carbon pathway for the electricity sector. And according to that study, which is very granular and very detailed on a year-by-year basis, storage actually is going to play a very big role in the development of the energy sector in Uzbekistan and on the path to net zero by 2050.
Well, since we mentioned the grid here is quite outdated. It's been here since the Soviet Union. How do you see it being kind of overhauled and renovated? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems is even though you're increasing the capacity of electrical production, I don't think the grid would be able to handle it as it is, right?
True. That's why I mentioned that this is what we're working with the authorities on. So the one-to-one, let's say, rule of thumb about financing implies that the grid will require probably several billion dollars of investment. I cannot disclose too much detail in the pipeline we're working on, but we're working on substantial amounts as far as EBRD is concerned. And we're not the only multilateral obviously helping. So I think there is also discussion between all of the IFI financing partners and the authorities on how to actually coordinate in this respect to make sure that we achieve maximum results together in terms of the grid rollout, because this is going to be very important.
Yeah, it will play a big role in improving the FDI into the country, the special economic zones, improving the diversifying of the economy and the production capacity within all spheres.
Yes, that's correct.
And that kind of brings us into the banking sector.
Okay.
So how does the EBRD envision Uzbekistan's work to kind of inclusive banking, considering the transition, the digital transition that's happening right now?
Okay. So inclusion and digitalization, as I mentioned a bit earlier, are two of the three core strategic priorities of EBRD as a whole. We try to weave basically digital elements whenever we can in both direct transactions and the intermediated ones where we lend via partner financial institutions. In terms of the inclusion, I think the way that we achieve it, at least in this region, not only in Uzbekistan, is through two big programs. One, and they're both they're both targeting specific groups. One is our Central Asia Women in Business program, and the other one is a Central Asia Youth in Business program. So the first one has been active for a while, and it's basically to support women-led businesses with access to finance, with technology, and with technical advice. We have been doing this for a while. I think one of the examples that I can mention in Uzbekistan is a big partner for us, has been IPAC Yuli, which is one of our banking partners in the private sector. When it comes to youth in business, this is going to be a new program. We expect it also to be substantial. It will have the similar features to the Women in Business program, but will be targeting businesses that are led by young entrepreneurs. We expect to launch this one in December in Tashkent. So this is where it will start from. There is also one, I think, space which sometimes is overlooked in terms of support, and this is for micro borrowers, so those that need to borrow a few thousand, 10, 15, $20,000. We try to work in this respect with microfinance institutions and other non-bank, as we call them, financial institutions. And also in terms of digital space, I think apart from trying to weave digital elements in each of the transactions we do work directly, let's say, in projects that have a very core digital element. And the one that I can mention as the best example for Uzbekistan is our investment a little bit over 2 years ago in TBC, which is the first digital bank in the country, and which started from zero, and at the moment has a client base of more than 2.5 million, and has
That's a big growth in a short time.
It's a very big growth in a short time. I think we have also been we've been very happy because it has actually, in some of the respects of the initial projections we had, this has exceeded what we expected, and it's a model where now TBC is able to offer anything from car loans to micro loans to payments, online, etc. And we expect to be able this year to expand this to provide digital loans to micro, small and medium enterprises through TBC. It's also a model that has been copied. If you look now, there are several licenses out there for digital banks. So it's a model that others have been basically looking at and trying to replicate.
Have they been successful?
It's difficult to say. This one was the first bank and it has been around for only 2 years. So we need to give also the others time. Some of them are still at licensing stage, so they haven't started operations. We will see, I think, the results in 2 to 3 years. But we would be very happy to see them be successful. We would be happy to see more competition even in the digital banking space. It's part of what we like to encourage as EBRD, but also it would be something quite positive for us because it will show that an initial project that we did had, let's say, a good impact, a good demonstration effect for others to go out there and replicate it because it represents a successful business model.
So why do you think competition would be so healthy for Uzbekistan?
Competition is healthy not only for Uzbekistan, it's always healthy anywhere. Competition will lead normally to make the players in any given market try to improve both the services they offer to the end user, to their clients, but also to compete on price. So ultimately it leads to improvements in both price and quality. It's typical for, I think, any business, not simply the digital banking.
Yes, any sort of market.
Yes.
Yes. I also wanted to ask you a bit about the human capital here in Uzbekistan. How do you see its potential? Especially, I mean, considering Uzbekistan has a majority of below 30 population, and that's kind of what's inspired your new project, correct?
I think that's a very good question. Uzbekistan is one of the rare cases in today's world where you have a young and growing population. Obviously, from a labor market perspective, this is quite good because it offers you a large supply of labor that is available and for businesses to use. I think what is important in terms of human capital, though, is that we need to work closely together, not only EBRD, all of the other multilateral partners and the authorities, to make sure that then this labor coming on the market, the human capital, actually has the necessary skills to match what the businesses require. And this is, I think, quite a long-term game, which begins with having, say, a strong national education system, from the elementary school, going through middle school, through high school, maybe vocational schools where you train people for certain professions, and then the university curricula. I think Uzbekistan has all of the ingredients to continue to be a successful country, as it has been so far, and I only look forward to seeing, I think, more results of this improving, let's say, and growing labor force in the future.
Yes, I think that is one of the major issues Uzbekistan will face is to retain this educated youth and to have them stay without having this brain drain happening.
I think that is also a problem which is not, let's say, specific to Uzbekistan. It has been established in other countries as well that there is often a certain degree of brain drain from, let's say, developing countries to more developed countries. But I think the best way to avoid the brain drain is to offer opportunities to the brain to develop and be rewarded in the country. So in that respect, I think the country has a strategy for development until 2030, a core tenet of which is doubling the GDP, which means also doubling the income. So I hope that as that strategy gets carried out and realized, we'll see more and more people staying. There are also certain aspects that I think the authorities are targeting, for example, the ICT sector, where they're trying to attract or retain as much brain as possible through incentives, through better opportunities to do business in Uzbekistan. So there are certain strategic elements that are being implemented to try to, let's say, reduce or to facilitate the retention of the brain.
So, considering Uzbekistan's double landlocked status, how do you foresee its potential to be a transit hub?
Okay. I think Uzbekistan has a good potential to be a transit hub, and at the moment it is working actively with the surrounding countries to help realize this. Obviously it has to do so because it is a double landlocked country, so it needs close cooperation with the surrounding countries in order to present itself as a viable and attractive option, both in terms of cargo transport, whether it's hub or transit. Now, there are certain, let's say, soft elements that one can work on or implement, and there are then strategic considerations. So on the soft side, I think one of the things that Uzbekistan needs to do is to upgrade basically its border crossings and implement digital solutions there to make the cargo transport as seamless as possible. So this is because studies have shown from other countries as well that a lot of the cost that is associated with cargo transport is actually related to border crossings and inefficiencies at the border crossings. From a strategic perspective, I think the best way to transport cargo obviously is rail, and what this would require in the context of Uzbekistan is reform of the national carrier, the railways, in order to improve their efficiency. In this respect, I think presidential decree which came out, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks ago, setting out the steps on how to unbundle and reform the sector is actually a very good first step in this direction. Then obviously the railways will need to work on certain items, let's say electrification of large parts of the network, and not only around Tashkent, but in areas like in Fergana Valley, around Bukhara, around Khiva. They would need to work on refreshing their rolling stock. And I think one big strategic consideration also for Uzbekistan would be working closely with the surrounding countries on the Trans-Caspian corridor.
Yes.
So this would represent a big, I think, alternative transport route for the country. And as EBRD, with the funding from the European Union, actually we conducted quite a detailed study on this particular topic, which was presented in June this year publicly, and for which there will be actually a conference organized by the EU in Brussels at the end of January next year, getting together basically authorities, potential investors, donors. This project this study does identify a number of key projects for Uzbekistan in terms of improving basically its attractiveness as a both hub and transit country. There are motorways that need to be implemented, namely Tashkent Samarkand and Tashkent Andijan. There are a number of rail project upgrades and connections, and also very importantly for Uzbekistan, it needs to also develop things like dry ports, logistics centers, etc. We have obviously expressed our readiness to the authorities to help them with all of these elements, and because the certain elements of this could also be done with private sector involvement, we are at the moment discussing with private sector companies in the areas of logistics centers to see how we can help implement those.
As the EBRD promotes ESG and corporate good governance globally, as well as more specifically within Central Asia and Uzbekistan, what will the EBRD do to ensure that these principles are incorporated within Uzbekistan's economic and corporate sphere?
I think the ESG and CCG components are two components that are more and more present in our operations, and we try to incorporate these both in work with our financial institutions, so our partner financial institutions, but also in the direct projects. The important, obviously, thing being that once they start basically updating their policies and systems, this is in turn going to achieve, let's say, more and more critical mass and help Uzbekistan in its way towards a low carbon and climate resilient economy. What this means is that basically our partner financial institutions or clients to whom we do direct lending would update basically both their ESG and CCG policies. This would lead to them having basically more transparent disclosures and updating their risk management systems in this respect, because these are big risks, even though it's not easy to always quantify financially what the impact is, but also improve basically their access to the world of finance. Where the world is today. What we do in practical terms is that we often use technical cooperation funds to basically retain consultancy to help, whether it's partner financial institutions or direct clients, to do, let's say, an analysis or audit of their systems, and then identify the gaps to what the international best practice is, and to basically devise action plans on how to close these gaps. And this is basically the best way that we have to achieve it. This is what we do, let's say, on an individual client basis. Then on a more global basis, we have helped Uzbekistan with certain items. One of them, which I mentioned earlier, is the low carbon pathway for the electricity sector, because that has an industry-wide perspective. We're doing something similar in another emission-intensive industry, which is the chemicals, where we work with Uzkimyo Sanat to basically prepare a low-carbon pathway for the company itself to show, and we hope that we have developed a pathway for them to achieve as a company net zero emissions by 2050. And we also helped Uzbekistan launch its Chapter Zero initiative. This was in the context of the Climate Governance Initiative of the World Economic Forum. So these are a few of the, let's say, more visible items that we have been working on, in addition to just working with our clients.
Excellent.